Hi besties, welcome to the start of a new reading vlog. So this is going to be the vlog that I'm doing in collaboration with Sarah over at Sarah's Nightstand, where we each chose 3 books for each other to read that we didn't necessarily have the best reading experience with, and we want to see if the other person has the same type of reading experience or the same type of thoughts and opinions on the books. And so this is going to be the start of the vlog style wrap up that goes along with it, because I have actually started the first book in the project, and that is Say You Still Love Me by K.A. Tucker. Sarah definitely has not had the best experience with K.A. Tucker. She didn't love The Simple Wild, which is okay. We can still be friends with her, y'all. But she really didn't like this book. And so I think that K.A. Tucker might not be the author for her, but she knows that because I love the Simple Wild series so much, she wanted me to read this one to see what I thought about it. And I started this one last night, and I also listened to it while I was getting ready this morning. I would say that I'm probably about the 25% to 30% mark. And I'm gonna be honest and say that I am not loving this one. So this follows our main character, Piper, and she is 29 years old. She's from a very, very wealthy and privileged family. Her father owns a multi-billion-dollar real estate development company. She is set to take over the company from him when he retired. And one day she's leaving her office building and she thinks that she sees a face from her past, a guy named Kyle who she met when she was 16 years old and a counselor at a summer camp. And apparently they had like this really intense, or as intense as you could possibly get at 16, love affair. And then he just kind of ups and leaves without saying a word, and he never contacts her since. Like, she hasn't heard from him since that time, and he has kind of haunted her thoughts for the past 13 years. And all of a sudden she thinks that she sees him, and we've just gotten to the point in the story where she finds out that he has been hired to be one of the new security guards for their building. And so now she's going to see him every day. And they've had a couple of interactions that haven't been great. He really just wants to keep things professional. He doesn't want to have really any personal connection to her. He doesn't want to catch up. He doesn't want to do anything like that. And she is once again really hurt and perplexed by this because he meant a lot to her and she thought that she meant something to him too. And so we're just kind of getting to this point. Nothing much has happened beyond this. And so obviously we're getting their perspectives in the present day as they're reconnecting, but we're also flashing back to their time at summer camp when they're 16. And I think that this is really what is not working for me with this story, because it's definitely adding a young adult flair to the book that I was not expecting and I was not wanting. I am definitely more invested in the present day perspective than I am in the summer camp perspective. And I feel like every time we flash back, I am removed from the story. I'm removed from the moment. I feel like this book would have been much better served had we gotten both Piper and Kyle's perspective. To my knowledge, we don't get Kyle's perspective at all. We only get Piper's perspective in the present and then back during summer camp. And I really feel like what K.A. Tucker should have done was to have both Piper and Kyle's perspective in the present day, and we would have been able to get their history from their views without having to actually flash back to the time at summer camp. And I really want to see Kyle's perspective, and I want to see what is going on in his head. Part of me kind of understands why K.A. Tucker didn't do it, because we really don't understand what happened to Kyle. So we're gonna find that out as Piper finds that out. So part of me understands it. Unfortunately, that's just really not working for me. And in some ways, I'm kind of already ready for the story to be over. I do plan on coming back when I'm closer to the mid-mark or past the mid-mark to see like if my thoughts and feelings have changed. I don't know, but just this, the whole way that it's told and the vibes and stuff like that, it's just not working for me. I have had problems in the past with stories that rely heavily on teenage relationships that ended and having them cause so much distress in the current day. I just don't buy it. Having this be so consuming for her after all of this time, like, I just don't know. I never buy that, and I don't like stories that hinder on that. We're gonna see if K.A. Tucker can pull this off. I do plan on listening to it more today as I'm doing chores and cooking dinner and stuff like that, so I hope to get a good chunk of the way through. So maybe before bedtime tonight, I will have a little bit more information. So I will come back when I have more thoughts on Say You Still Love Me. Hey everyone, so it is later the same day and I wanted to go ahead and give you an update as promised. I apologize if you can hear the dryer in the background. I'm out in my living room and the laundry room is not too terribly far away. But I am now over the halfway mark in Say You Still Love Me by K.A. Tucker, and unfortunately my feelings on it really haven't changed, and I'm honestly not enjoying it any more than I was at the very start of the book. This is truly turning out to be a book that exists and I'm reading it. It definitely does not have the level of depth or substance that I was hoping for when I started reading the story. It feels very surface level, very underdeveloped. The characters do not even seem all that three-dimensional in my opinion, and I just cannot really get behind everything that's happening in here, because we have now gotten to the point where Piper and Kyle have kind of had their first confrontation and everything is coming out in the open, and you find out why Kyle essentially ghosted Piper all those years ago. And then we also find out why Kyle decided to go work in her building, and it's literally because he wanted to see her again after all these years. And I'm like, excuse me? You took off, you never contacted her again after 13 years, you just dropped this bombshell on her as to why that was, and now you are all of a sudden back here working in her building just to get a glimpse of her. You You have no idea who she is as a person. You have no idea if she's available. You have no idea if she wants anything to do with you. And yet you are sitting here in her building, kind of like a little bit of a stalker. I don't know. That just didn't sit well with me. And then Piper, for her part, is all of a sudden basically back to being a teenager again. You know, she's completely hot for him. And when she finds out that he's single, she instantly almost wants to date him and jump his bones. And I'm like, seriously, people, you were 16 at a summer camp and your relationship lasted all of 8 weeks. And at the point where I am in the story, they have really only even been together at camp for 2 weeks, and all of a sudden they're hot and they're heavy and it's serious. And I'm like, this is so completely ridiculous. I cannot relate to it. I can't get behind it. I can't connect to it. I'm definitely not emotionally invested in it. And obviously I'm just a little bit annoyed, to be honest with you. This is certainly not what I was expecting going into this story. And I'm honestly not really having that great of a time. And I'm not necessarily hating it either. Like when I'm reading it, it's an easy read. I can follow along. It doesn't use a lot of brain power or anything like that. It's just, I'm not having the best reading experience with it, and I'm just ready for it to be done. I'm going to do my best to listen to as much of this as possible so that by the time I get to work tomorrow, after I've gotten ready for work, after I've made my commute to work, that I am ready to wrap up this read and just get it done. Hey everybody, so I'm just on my way into work, but I wanted to go ahead and give you a final update because I did just finish Say You Still Love Me by K.A. Tucker, and also I want to apologize for any notable shift in quality. When I'm at home, I try to vlog with my camera, but I do not think I will ever get to a point where I actually want to take my camera out unless I'm like traveling or something, but taking it to work just to film a vlog clip is not going to happen, so this is going to be filmed on my phone. So I'm happy to say that towards the end of the story, I started to get a little bit more invested and a little bit more interested, but it took quite a long time. I had maybe only about an hour of listening time left before that started to happen. When things started to get revealed, all the secrets came out. I really don't think that a book should take that long, especially a romance book, to get you invested and interested and actually wanting to see the relationship thrive. You know what I mean? So for the most part, I'm going to stand by all of my previous statements. I do think that for the most part, this was very superficial. There was a lack of substance and a lack of development. I do really feel like the story would have benefited from having Kyle's own perspective so that we could see everything from his eyes and that we can see the development that he went through as a character and not just Piper, and we could see how he felt about her and everything like that. I am still a little bit sketch on the fact that they had summer camp for 8 weeks when they were 16 and still held these strong feelings after all these years. I think it would have been more believable had they both moved on and been happy, and then when they reconnected later in life, those feelings resurfaced. But as it was very much played off as they never stopped thinking about each other. They've been in love with each other since they were 16. And that is just really not something that I can buy. Like I said before, I'm not trying to discount the feelings of teenagers. And I know that people start dating as teenagers and end up spending their whole lives together. But when they've been separated for so long, and Piper has been operating under the assumption that Kyle just basically ghosted her until she found out the truth, you would think that you would be able to move on and just let go of that. So there was a lot of this story that really didn't work for me. And I really didn't start to feel the typical K.A. Tucker vibes until, like I said, that last hour or so of listening. I think I am gonna settle on a 3 stars because it wasn't so egregiously awful that I wanted to DNF it, but for the vast majority of the story, I really wasn't enjoying myself. I may end up changing that rating by the end of this project. For the most part, this just did not work for me. So I don't know offhand what Sarah rated this story, but for the most part, I do think that she was right about this one. All right, everybody, I'm going into work, but I will update you when I have started the next book for this project. Hi friends, so I am just about to head into work, but before I did, I wanted to take a moment and give you an update because not only have I started the next book in this project, but I'm actually a decent amount of the way through. I think I've just hit the 30% mark in Lost Among the Living by Simone St. James. So before I got too much further in, I wanted to go ahead and kind of come on here and tell you my thoughts and feelings because unfortunately, I'm not loving it. And in all honesty, I'm a bit bored. And the fact that I'm only 30% of the way through this is very unfortunate because I don't know if I really want to listen to another 70%. So this follows our main character, Jo. It is set in 1921 after the end of the Great War, and she lost her husband Alex to the war about 3 years prior. And several months ago, her husband's aunt Dottie contacted her and basically, knew Jo was kind of on her own and said that she needed like a paid companion, essentially a personal assistant. So for the past several months, she and Dottie have been touring the continent, and now they are finally returning to Dottie's home in England. As soon as they get there, Jo kind of realizes that things are a little bit off, things are not great in the family. Dottie's own son was in the war, and for the past 3 years, he has been away somewhere. We don't necessarily know where at this point, but we know that he has been ill. He is not very well. But we find out that Dottie kind of has plans of setting up her son with Joe, and Joe is having none of that, of course. And then Dottie's own husband is a very cold and distant man. He and Dottie don't really have a great relationship. And not only that, but they actually lost their daughter Fran to suicide a couple of years prior. Apparently she was mentally unwell and she kind of like jumped off their house or something to that effect. And Joe very much sympathizes because she has a mother who is actually locked up in a mental institution because she also is mentally unwell. Now, if you are unfamiliar with Simone St. James, she typically writes ghost stories. Her new books are kind of more on the thriller side. They're like paranormal thrillers. And then her first books, her previous books, are all historical paranormal. And so that's what this is, like I said, set in 1921. And we are 30% of the way through, and there has been almost nothing ghostly in nature. Our main character kind of thinks that she's been seeing some things, but of course she's not entirely sure. And because mental illness runs in her family, she thinks that she's going crazy. She thinks that she's going to turn out exactly like her mother. So she's not entirely sure what she's seeing. And up until this point, it's really just been about our main character talking about her relationship with the husband that she lost and that she misses dearly, and her everyday dealings with Dottie and what's going on in Dottie's family. And that is not really what I'm in this book for. You know what I mean? If I wanted a slow, character-driven story set in a historical timeline, I would read a purely historical fiction novel. But as it is just kind of dragging out. It's not really holding my attention. Now, I do admit that it could very much be a me thing and not a book thing because I feel very distracted right now. Of course, as per usual, there's a lot going on at my job and just other things that I have to take care of. And so I'm really wanting a book to keep me engaged and keep me wanting to turn the pages. And it's just not doing that. And so I'm getting a little bit frustrated with it just because it is not holding my attention. At this point, I don't know whether it's a book thing or a me thing, but I'm definitely going to continue with it. I'm definitely going to give it more of a shot. But anyway, y'all, I need to go ahead and drive to work. And I will either give you an update when I'm further along in the book or when I finished it. Hello, my friends. It only has been a few seconds for you, but it has actually been several days for me because what ended up happening that same day that I provided you the update for Lost Among the Living, I actually decided to set it down because I was just not enjoying myself. I was not having a good time. I was not connecting with it. I was zoning in and out. I wasn't looking forward to reading it. So I thought, you know what, let me just go ahead and set it down. I wasn't necessarily committed to DNFing it at that point, but I set it down. I started another book and I almost completely forgot about it. And I definitely forgot about this vlog. I forgot about updating this vlog. So I think that can kind of tell you exactly how little Lost Among the Living was meaning to me. Now, I will say that I am not fully ready to admit that this was a book thing and not a me thing. I have felt very, very distracted recently, almost a little bit slumpy, and I don't know if I'm feeling slumpy because I'm distracted and have so many things going on. But all I do know is that I wasn't really enjoying Lost Among the Living. It wasn't gripping. It wasn't compelling. It was moving very, very slow. I ended up putting it down at 36%, which was not too terribly much farther into the book than when I had first updated you, and it still had not improved any. We hadn't really gotten any more ghost action or anything like that, and I just really wasn't invested enough to allow myself to kind of slog through it. So like I said, I did go ahead and stop reading it. I ended up reading another book in its entirety and then starting another one, and I still have not wanted to go back to it. So I think I have officially made the decision to DNF it. But like I said, I am not willing to admit that this was a book thing and not a me thing. I feel like in a different place and time, in a different headspace, I might be able to have enjoyed it better. I am also not willing to give up on Simone St. James's backlist. There are still 3 other backlist books of hers that are historical in nature that still sound really awesome that I do want to read and give a shot. So if I do pick up another one of those books and decide that I don't like it either, then I probably will go ahead and abandon her backlist and just focus on her new releases. But considering how much I really enjoyed The Haunting of Maddie Clare, I really do want to give more of hers a shot. This could just be a one-off. You know, not every book by a favorite author is also going to be a new favorite. So I am admitting defeat on this one, and we're going to move on to the final book in this, which is The 10,000 Doors of January. I do not know exactly when I'm going to start that one. I think I'm going to allow myself to read some of the other books on my TBR before getting into this one because I want to make sure that I'm in the right headspace, the right mindset in order to actually enjoy that one as much as humanly possible. So that is a plan. I, of course, will update you when I have started The 10,000 Doors of January. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I wanted to come on here because I have officially started the final book in this project, which is The 10,000 Doors of January by Alex E. Harrow. I have just reached the 25% mark in this book. For the majority of what I've read so far, I have been struggling a little bit, but I do believe that it is 100% a me thing and not a book thing. Because first of all, this book is beautifully written. I absolutely adore Alex E. Harrow's writing. She is such a talented writer, and she has a way of creating wonderful atmosphere and the perfect vibes serves for the type of story that she is trying to tell. So I have no gripes at all with the way that this is written, and y'all know how I felt about Starling House. So I'm so excited to be back in another one of Alex E. Harrow's stories. The problem is that I didn't necessarily know that this was historical in nature, and we all know that I struggle with historical fantasy, and so that is definitely part of it. Also, I don't necessarily feel as though I'm in the right mindset for another historical, so I think that is also playing a role in my enjoyment within the story. However, I do think that I might have reached a part of the story where I am becoming a little bit more invested. I'm not sure. I'm definitely going to plug my way through to see if I can fully emotionally connect to the story. I'm just not entirely there yet. But again, I do think that it's 100% a me thing and not a book thing. So this follows our main character, January, and for the majority of her life, she's been kind of a ward to this wealthy businessman named Mr. Locke. And Mr. Locke owns this vast estate in Vermont that he fills with unique and interesting artifacts. In fact, January's dad actually works for Mr. Locke, and he goes all over the world in search of these artifacts. And whenever he's not around, January is basically in Mr. Locke's care. Now, January loves Mr. Locke, and she's very grateful for everything that he has done for her, but she wants to live a big life. She wants to go on grand adventures. She always wants her dad to take her with him whenever he goes somewhere, and he just won't. So she's kind of been locked up in this estate for the majority of her life, and she wants so much more than that. And also, even though her ethnicity at this point has not been explicitly stated, it has basically been alluded to that she is a light-skinned person of color, and so she definitely knows that some people look at her weirdly. She knows that people like her are not treated the best during this time, so she starts to become a little bit resentful of Mr. Locke and his buddies at the New England Anthropological Society or something like that, who all collect these artifacts and whatnot, because they're old stodgy white men, you know what I mean? So she is definitely longing for more. And then one day she uncovers this book. It's an unusual book, and when she starts to read, she realizes that it's a book that is basically like a nonfiction, but it's talking about impossible things. It's talking about doors to other worlds. It's talking about grand adventures, danger, love, things like that. And she gets very swept up in it because when she was young, when she was just 7 years old, she claims to have found a door to another world, and she went through it and came back out. And of course, nobody believed her, and she hasn't really thought about it until this point when the book jogged her memory. So there is kind of a book in a book scenario here, because we are reading snippets of the book of this author who claims to know somebody who has discovered doors to other worlds, and it's about that person's adventures. So I'm not entirely sure the trajectory of this story. I was assuming that this was about January finding multiple doors and going through them and her experiences, but that's not been the case aside from the one door that she found when she was 7. So far, she has found the book, and we have kind of been introduced to the main character of that book and her experience with a first door. And I think we are about to go into the second adventure. I have absolutely no idea where this is going, but I'm starting to get a little bit more invested, especially now that January is older. She's 17, and at the start of the book, she was 7, and we were kind of chronicling her life for the first 10 years with Mr. Locke and what she was going through. And now that we're 25% of the way in, I think we're starting to get a little bit more into the meat of the story. Like I said, I'm not entirely emotionally invested in this. It's still taking some effort for me to concentrate on the story and what I'm reading, but I definitely want to give it a shot because I absolutely love Alex E. Harrow's writing. Now, this is her debut, and this is very, very different from Starling House, which was a contemporary horror/magical realism novel, and so this obviously is very different, set in a historical time period. Anyway, I'm going to continue on, and I will give you an update once I'm closer to the midway point. Hello, everyone. Sorry for the terrible lighting. It is a crazy dark and gloomy day today. In fact, you might be able to hear the rain start picking up on the outside of my car as I sit here waiting for an appointment. But I did want to go ahead and come on here and update you really quick because it has actually been quite a while since I told you that I had started the 10,000 Doors of January. And it's been about a week, and I haven't really made it much further. And the reason is because I was convinced I was going to DNF the book. In fact, I actually came on here and had a whole clip about why I was DNFing it and things like that. But it just never felt right to me. I felt awful DNFing it because I was 100% convinced that my lack of enjoyment in the story was primarily a me thing. I've mentioned before, but it is a historical fantasy, and I was very much struggling with it. I was also struggling with some other things in the book, namely the story within a story. There are a lot of excerpts in this book from that story, and I wasn't connecting to any of those. I felt like I was being taken out of the story. You know, I was trying to focus on January and what she was doing, not what the character in this book was doing. You know what I'm saying? So I was struggling with that. I wasn't feeling emotionally connected to the story or any of the characters. I am a very character-driven reader, but I've noticed that what really helps me connect to characters is their connection to others in the story and like their dialogue and stuff. And there's just not a whole lot of that because January, for the most part, is on her own. She's the ward of this Mr. Locke. She doesn't really have a lot of contact with him for the most part. Her dad is always out and about doing things for Mr. Locke. So there are not very many relationships that she has, and that is definitely a big part of her character and why she wants a bigger life. So I completely understand that. But it was making it very hard for me to connect. And the fact of the matter is that I had been feeling kind of slumpy prior to starting the 10,000 Doors of January. And so picking up a book that was historical fantasy just was not helping any, you know? So I feel like all of these were stacking against me, and I wasn't able to fully really get into the story. And so because I wasn't looking forward to reading it, I ultimately decided that I was just going to DNF it. But like I said, that wasn't sitting well with me. I felt like if the story had found me at a different place in life, that I would be able to at least finish it. It might not be a new favorite or anything, but I was going to finish it because I absolutely love the writing. The writing is stunning. I absolutely love the atmosphere that Alexi Harrow is able to create. I have no faults whatsoever with any of that. It was just the overall plot of the story was not that interesting to me. But yesterday I had to commute to our other campus, which is about an hour and 15 minutes away from where I typically work. I was listening to another story, but all of a sudden I kind of felt like something a little bit slower, something a bit more atmospheric. So I was like, you know what? Let me go ahead and put on the 10,000 Doors of January. So I think I got about another hour total listened to it yesterday, and it got to a more interesting part. And so I was like, you know what? I think that I can do this. I think that I can finish it. I think I just need to be in the right headspace to pick up the book. What I think I'm going to do is just listen to it a little bit here and there and pick it up when I'm in the mood and the mindset to. So like I said, I listened to about an hour of it yesterday. I'm a little bit more into it now. So I'm going to go ahead and try to keep plugging away at it, and hopefully I can finish it. And I will let you know either if I have finished it or if I have 100% officially decided to DNF it. Hi everyone. So I was wrapping up editing this vlog and I realized that my final clip talking about the 10,000 Doors of January has disappeared. I must have accidentally deleted it thinking I had already uploaded it to my computer. So I wanted to come on here and do my best to explain my thoughts and feelings on the 10,000 Doors of January now that it's been about a month since I've read it, and then just close out this vlog and this project. So I've touched upon this a little bit in the other clips, but unfortunately there was like a perfect storm going against the 10,000 Doors of January, because the fact that it was a historical fantasy was just not something that I was in a position to really want to read at that time. I had just come off reading a couple of other historicals. I had read the Diane Chamberlain at the beginning of the month. I had also just finished Wuthering Heights, which was written, you know, in the 1800s. And then of course I had tried and failed at reading the Simone St. James, which was also historical. So reading another historical was the last thing I wanted, especially during a time when I was starting to feel slumpy, and it being a historical fantasy just made it all the more worse. But that was through no fault of the book. I could tell that this was beautifully written. It was very, very atmospheric. And so when I got to the point where I wanted to DNF it, I was angry at myself for that, because I knew that in another place, another month even, I would have probably been able to enjoy this book so much more, even though it is historical fantasy. And so because of that, one day I just kind of got a whim to pick it up again, and I did. And that was what the last clip was. But even still, after I started to get back into the book, I wasn't able to listen to it continuously. I still had to do a start and stop kind of thing. I had to be in the perfect mood and the right mindset in order to pick it up, just so I could concentrate on it and give it the attention it deserved. But at the end of the day, I honestly think that I'm going to settle on a 4 stars, because I really appreciated the direction that Alexi Harrow took the story. I honestly did not have the correct expectations going into it, and I'm not just talking about the fact that it was historical fantasy. I'm just talking about the plot in general. I realized that the synopsis on the back of the story is actually really vague and doesn't tell you hardly anything about what's going to happen. And towards the 50% mark, you kind of get a better idea of what the focus of the story is and where it is actually heading. And at that point, I started to get a little bit more invested because it became more high stakes. So whereas the first 50% I felt was very, very slow, and I certainly was not appreciating the book within a book aspect, it was taking me right out of the story. Once you realize the importance of that story and how it actually connects to January, it made a world of difference. And once January was actually outside of Locke's reach and she was on her own and trying to survive and trying to find out what happened to her father, whom everybody is telling her is dead at this point, that's when I started to get way more invested in the story. It was never a true emotional investment though, because some of what I said before still stands. I connect a lot with characters through their relationship with others and their dialogue and things of that nature, and this book was still very much lacking that overall. But I was definitely intrigued and I wanted to go with January on her journey, and ultimately I ended up really appreciating and valuing the story. As I mentioned before, I really enjoyed the direction that Alexi Harrow took this. It was a direction that I was not necessarily expecting, and it was more than what I was originally expecting with the story, if that makes sense. But in the end, I really did come to value the 10,000 Doors of January for the overall messages that I was trying to give, for the overall journey that January went on. And I just feel so terribly that it was such a rocky reading experience through no fault of the book. And I am very glad that I decided to push through and continue reading the story, and I was able to ultimately get a lot out of it in the end. So I think because of that, I think that I am going to settle on a 4 stars. That is it for this latest collaboration with Sarah. I hope that you've enjoyed. Just as a quick summation, the first book I read was Say You'll Still Love Me by K.E. Tucker, and I think that I'm actually going to land on a 2.5 stars for this, because ultimately I really didn't enjoy it. I had a lot of technical issues with it. I really don't remember almost anything about it at this point, and I would say that my reading experience was was far more negative than positive. So I think 3 would be a little bit too generous for the story. Then I DNF'd Lost Among the Living by Simone St. James, and I successfully completed finally the 10,000 Doors of January by Alex E. Hero, which I gave a 4 stars. So was Sarah right about these books? In some ways yes, in some ways no. I think she was definitely right about Say You'll Still Love Me by K.A. Tucker. With regard to Lost Among the Living by Simone St. James, I honestly do not know, because I still believe that that could definitely have been a me thing and not a book thing, because I have enjoyed another historical by Simone St. James and I could potentially enjoy the other ones. This book could also have been affected by my slumpiness, by my frame of mind, so I am not entirely sure if I can say Sarah was right about this one. And then with regard to the 10,000 Doors of January, I think that I definitely enjoyed this more than Sarah did, even though I had such a rocky reading experience with it, but that was more of my frame of mind than anything. And that is it for this project, y'all. I have to go ahead and get this popped into my computer so I can get it edited and uploaded very quickly. I hope that you enjoy, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye guys.